You said I was born in a very very Zionist family. My father, like you said, served was a general in the Israeli army. He was a young officer when Israel was established, and had a military career. And my grandfather was a signer of the Israeli Declaration of Independence. So I come from a Zionist family through and through. Many family members of mine had important positions prior to the establishing the state, and then once the state of Israel was established, and had a very strong impact and influence on what the state became and what the army became. And my transformation obviously was gradual, and I always say, major transformations, especially in terms of of how we view the world, usually come up as a result of a terrible tragedy, sadly. And so, although again I was pretty far along, but then in 1997, my sister's little girl was killed by Palestinians in an attack in Jerusalem, and that's precisely the type of experience that shakes you to the core and forces you to re-examine what you believe in, re-examine the truths you have been taught, and re-examine the reality in which you exist. And that's precisely what I did. And I ended up reaching out to Palestinians in Palestine and to Palestinians here in the United States. And thankfully, I was surrounded by and welcomed by Palestinians, again, both in the United States and in Palestine, although they had no reason to accept me and be so as warm as welcoming as they were. And gradually, they took me through this very difficult step of, realizing, first of all, that there are two opposite narratives, completely opposite narratives. They don't differ in detail or nuance. They differ fundamentally. And then, take me by the hand like a baby learning to walk, to slowly and gradually realize that the truth that I believed was the truth, or the truth that I was taught and that I believed in, was really a lie. And that the truth actually is on the other side of the story. The Palestinian story is the truth, and it's a very difficult thing to do, especially when you come from a kind of uber patriotic Zionist family like myself. And like you said, when I was young, of course I was a Zionist. I was looking forward to serving in the army. I was looking forward to presenting Israel and doing everything I can. I believed in it wholeheartedly. But then eventually the meeting with Palestinians, the discussions with Palestinians, and stepping on the ground into Palestine, realizing, as the title of my subtitle of my book is, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. I realized that I was an Israeli, but I existed in Palestine. And of course, that book, The Journey, forced me, and it actually helps a lot of other people too when they read the book, to go through the process of understanding what's an Israeli, what is Israel, what is Palestine, and how do these things exist simultaneously, even though you've got these two fundamentally different narratives. This is the trajectory. Now, Israel has been at it in terms of the media, for over 100 years. The Zionist movement invested heavily in the very, very early years, not only in connections with the media, but with, culturally and politically and every other way that they could to influence American and Western thinking in general. They didn't only do this in the U.S. And they, like I said, after 100 or so years, you get very good at this. And now you don't really need to convince an American politician to support Israel. It goes without saying, because they learned it in school, and they learned it in church, and they learned it in synagogue, and they learned it in whatever other activities they were part of as they were growing up. And another thing that the Zionists learned very, very early on, particularly in America, is that all politics here is local. So in every city you go to, every mayor gets a trip to Israel, funded by whatever, some Zionist organization. Every police chief, every member of every city council, even the smallest cities in America, and on and on and on. So they invest heavily in this, and they have been for a very long time. So it goes without saying that you support Israel, because that's what they've been taught, that's what they know, that's what they're comfortable with.
The racism here in the United States, the racism in South Africa, the racism in Israel, in terms of having a grip on people's mind.
I think it's a great point, particularly with all the, there's this rumor mill that Israelis are, or somebody's putting out there, but a lot of people are buying into that there were, beheadings and babies were murdered, and now there's a new rumor that they beheaded and tortured pets, and and women were paraded naked and raped, and so on, and all of these things are being refuted very easily, and I think that's part of this effort to describe what we saw, the attack by Palestinians from Gaza, but to kind of describe Arabs in general as kind of a crazed, savage mob. That when they see a white woman, they're so incensed that they're just they have to rape her. They have to, strip her naked and rape her and parade her and so on. As you know what I mean? As though this was Roman legions or something. And it's part of this. It's part of this Islamophobic, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian propaganda that's taking place here and in Israel, very, very heavily, in both countries. And then there's been a video that's been going around of a woman who describes how in one of the kibbutzim in the south, describes how the fighters came in, they talked to her a little bit. She said, "Look, I've got children here." They said, "Don't worry, we're Muslims. We're not going to hurt you." And then, let her into the secure room, locked her up, and left. The kibbutzim where all the fighting was going on. And but this is exactly it. They have to continue. They have to keep pushing these racist stereotypes against Arabs, against Muslims, against Palestinians, to show them as being, uncivilized mobs.
I want to talk about why this attack happened when it happened, the military impact on it. Obviously, the Israeli government, their dominant narrative is this is our September 11th, and like the United States declared war on Muslim countries everywhere, invaded Afghanistan, invaded Iraq, bombed Libya, sent troops to Syria, bombed Syria, all of it done under the banner of the war against terror, that this will be used by the Israeli government, as we can clearly see, to try to do what the Israeli government has wanted to do for a long time through imprisoning the people in Gaza, terrorizing people, creating life in the West Bank, where a big part of the Palestinian population still lives in a way that makes life very, very, very hard, where Palestinians are treated basically as not just second-class citizens, but even worse. That they want to drive the Palestinians out. They want that land. This is about land. This has always been about land. It's been about expansionism and taking somebody else's land and doing it over a long-term period. But the Palestinian resistance has created many, many obstacles to that final solution, so to speak, for the Israeli government, which is to get rid of all of the Palestinians. So they want to do that. That's what the Israeli government hopes to be able to do at this moment. Whether they can do it, that remains to be seen. But I want to talk about the military side of this. In the recent couple of years, and especially in the recent period, Miko, there's been a rising tide of Palestinian resistance in the West Bank and elsewhere in historic Palestine. And I've seen reports, and you will know, but not being an expert, not following as carefully as you do, I don't actually know this, so I'd like you to respond to it. There were reports that the Israeli military had to remove some of its troops from the area around the fence where the people of Gaza are basically imprisoned, to other parts of the West Bank because of the growing tide of resistance, and this made the Israeli military more vulnerable along the fence where the incursion took place. Long term, though, can the Israeli government completely snuff out the Palestinian people as it desires? And doesn't this incident, no matter what the level of Israeli retaliation, no matter how brutal or genocidal it might be, it seems to me that it's revealed a vulnerability that exists for the Israeli military and the dream of constantly expanding Israel and constantly driving the Palestinian people out. There are certain vulnerabilities that the Israeli government certainly does have and its population does have, in the face of this kind of seemingly, at least in the outset, very successful military operation that seemed to take the Israeli military by surprise.
Well, I'll start with the end. There's no way in the world that Israel can eliminate the Palestinians or the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinian resistance is vast and diverse. And as you well know, the vast majority of Palestinian resistance has got nothing to do with picking up arms. It has to do with other ways, civil disobedience and so on, which we've seen over, since Israel was established. And Israel has been paranoid about all forms of Palestinian resistance, killing writers, killing poets, killing artists, killing, clergy, killing intellectuals, and on and on and on. Going on ever since this began. First of all, showing that only one side is evil, only one side is killing the other. And I have to say, I don't like to get into the gory details of what happens when people die and the pictures of the dead and the burnt and so on. But what do people think happen? What do they think happens when a 1-ton bomb or a half-a-ton bomb is dropped on an apartment building? And it affects an entire block. I mean, an entire block just disappears. City block disappears. What do you think happens to the children there? They don't think their heads are crushed and dismembered? You don't think children die from the fumes and get stuck in the rubble and die slowly? I mean, don't they think these horrifying things take place? And they take place by the thousands when Israel is bombing Gaza, by the thousands. Never mind all these stories about Palestinians doing this have been proven to be untrue. But this is happening right now as we speak, as these massive bombs are falling on apartment buildings. What do you think happens to the children in those buildings? What do you think happens to their little bodies? Do people need an actual description of a step-by-step how these young bodies get dismembered and die, and the ways in which they die? I mean, we gloss over it completely. We see a building collapse. We hear that there were, 20, 30, 40, however many people were killed, how many ever dozens were wounded, and we move on. Suddenly everybody here in the U.S. and, of course, Israelis have to describe every single, they found a baby that's head was chopped off and a dog. First of all, like I said, it's not true. You want to know how many heads get chopped off when the pictures we're seeing right now, what happens to the heads of these children? If we want to get into that conversation, it is really not going to be, come out very well for the people who support Israel. If anybody cares about children and their bodies and their well-being, look at these pictures. What do you think is under this rubble? What do people think is under the rubble when these buildings fall? A terrorist? No. This is all civilian. It's always civilians. Palestinians, first of all, are all civilians. They've never had a military. They've never had an army. So suddenly they're shocked. I remember this happened in the past. This happened before. At some point, people were asking me, what do you say to the, I forget what the story was, but there was some similar story to this. I said, what are you talking about? Look what's being done in Gaza. What do you think happens to the people, the children that are being bombed? Gaza has 55% of the people in Gaza are under the age of 18. It's a community. It's an entire society of children. And when they walk to school in the morning and the bombs come down, what do you think happens to them? What do you think happens to their heads? This is such hypocrisy. It is enraging. This hypocrisy, these attempts to show the other side as evil while completely glossing off the savagery by Israel and with the support, like you said, like you said earlier, support of the United States. These warplanes are American planes. And it's not, this is horrifying. Nobody thinks that all of the smoke comes out after all these bodies have been decimated and burnt. And the people who are dead are sometimes luckier than the ones who survive because there are no medical facilities. Hospitals have been bombed. And even if they weren't bombed, Israel doesn't allow the supplies to come in. And there's no electricity. A hospital without electricity, they have to use a generator, which means they need oil, which means the gasoline is running out, diesel is running out as well. This is a cruelty and a brutality that is unbelievable. And Joe Biden talks about the other side, the Palestinians, as being evil.